My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform views about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest LJ Rader. LJ is the head of the broadcast product group at Sport Radar, a Switzerland based sports analytics firm. LJ has also built a global following by pairing iconic works of art with unforgettable moments in sports, revealing surprising connections between worlds that don't seemingly overlap. What began as a playful social media experiment has evolved into a new book entitled Art But Make It Sports: Epic Matchups Where Art and Sports Collide. In the book, LJ expands on these matchups and shares fresh ways to experience art through humor, pattern recognition, and a keen eye for detail. During the program, we'll find out why and how LJ began this creative undertaking and how it's grown, developed, and led to this extremely engaging and informative book today. In the end, we'll come to better understand and appreciate that LJ's work is a reminder that innovation doesn't always mean creating something entirely new. It can come from seeing familiar things in entirely different ways. Let's start by meeting LJ and then finding out all about Art But Make It Sports: Epic Matchups Where Art and Sports Collide. Welcome, LJ. So delighted you're able to be here.
Very excited to be here as well. Thanks for having me.
I've had so much fun, learned so much from following your social media the last few years. Was very excited to hear about the book, eager to find out more about it and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if you just briefly share maybe a little bit more about your background, professional interest, what your current position entails.
Yeah, sure. So I think people, when they see the account, they end up being surprised that I don't actually work in the art world. I come from the sports side of things, so lifelong sports professional, was a fantasy sports writer, was a producer on the Olympics back in the day, and flash forward to now, I head up the broadcast product group. At a company that does sports data and analytics, so a lot of the tooling, research, and content that goes on behind the scenes. So you watch a football game and they say something like, that's the first time Pat Mahomes has had 4 touchdowns in the first quarter when the weather is at whatever degree. Like you need all the historic data to be wrangled in order to tell that story, and you need a fast way to look those things up. So those are the kinds of services that me and my team and I provide. So yeah, I've been at the company about 8 years, but lifelong in the sports field. So
Wonderful, wonderful. The whole idea of pairing fine art with sports is so original. When and how did this idea come to you, and how has it developed over time?
yeah, so I guess right around the time Instagram was becoming popular, I would see people posting selfies and photos of them out doing things, and that wasn't really my my speed. I was much more into posting jokes and kind of just stuff that I saw living in New York City. So I would go to museums and I would take pictures, and then I would literally write on the pictures, this looks like, Phil Jackson trying to introduce the triangle offense. And this I don't know, just kind of this looks like Philip Rivers screaming on top of a Francis Bacon painting. And I would post them to my personal Instagram. Anytime I'd go to a museum, I'd do like a batch of them. And then over time, I had friends say, you should make this its own, account. So reluctantly spun that up right at the end of 2019. Uh, Realized that instead of saying this, screaming Pope by Francis Bacon looks like Philip Rivers, maybe I just put the painting next to the image, and that's when it started to take off. So I've always seen things through a sports lens. Art is no different. Big fan of going to museums, galleries, auction houses, and I guess this little side hobby of me putting my own unique spin has grown into something a little bit bigger. So
Most definitely.
yeah.
When you first see either a sports moment or a piece of art, anything you're looking for first, like movement, emotion, composition?
Yeah, so people always say it should be called sports but make it art, not art but make it sports. But for me, it's art but make it sports because I spend a significant amount of time banking the art knowledge and banking the actual art images. So it does start with the art. I have a massive folder of art on my phone that I photographed all over the world, like 15,000 images. Uh, I'll blitz through a museum, room to room, kind of going picture, 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 and looking for unique compositions, things that stand out, things that have movement and color. And, I tend to avoid, for example, like landscape paintings really aren't going to come up all that often
Hmm.
necessarily. And if they do, it's like, okay, I compared a regular baseball field to a landscape. Like, no, but it's not going to resonate. Whereas, like, a Joan Mitchell's got colors, it's got movement, it's got chaos. Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. So, sort of curating my knowledge and the imagery of art ahead of time, and then yeah, I guess these days it's a little bit like I have a 15-month-old. I don't have a ton of time to work on the account. Still, do it as a hobby. Back in the day, it was like I was on every night, posting all the time, viral images, looking for images, just kind of always posting. Now it's very much a matter of like, I'll only focus on kind of the real big moments and real compelling imagery. The community has grown large enough where I get tagged all the time and people send in photos, so that really helps. So pairing those images with that art knowledge and something tends to come out of it.
Oh, for sure. Can you sort of articulate how your mind makes the leap between these century-old paintings and a modern sports image?
Yeah, to me they're not that different. You've got for the more straightforward ones, you've got figures on a canvas, and artists try to capture movement, and obviously athletes are constantly moving. So mentally, there's really not a ton of difference. And on the abstract side, right, you'll get photos of players piled up in front of a goal in hockey, and you can't make out their faces, and that's when you think about like what does an abstract painting tend to focus on. You're not doing, details or portraiture. You're pulling out the things that maybe make something human, but try to make it as not human as possible, right? So they're at like a fundamental level, these things are kind of the same. Obviously, they take different forms. My brain, I guess, is like a photographic memory of sorts, a lot more of like pattern recognition, and then maybe not photographic, but in the sense of I can look at a sports image and tell what theme in art history that might be because I've mentally banked what, the Lamentation of Christ looks like. So if there's a player, leaning this way with their head back, it's like, okay, I've seen that in certain themes in art history. Or the alternative being, uh, you know, a sports image is focused on just like, let's just say the pucks and sticks. So you've got lines and circles. It's like, all right, maybe I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but that's like textbook Kandinsky, right? He's got lines and circles, and obviously deeper than that, but at least as a starting off point, if you've got uh, like colors in a pattern in brushstrokes, it's like, okay, Alma Thomas could play well. Uh, so God, I probably thousands of artists that I know their styles. And honestly, that's the more fun. Like sometimes I'll see a sports image and I'll know exactly the painting. And it's like, okay, that's not fun. And I know it, I'll post it, whatever. For me, it's more fun of like recognizing that, okay, this looks like something. I don't quite know what it is. Like Joan Moreau is, Miro. See, I also am not classically trained, so I'm not used to like saying the names out loud of artists. But it's like, okay, it looks like his style. Let me go look through his works and see if there's something that matches. So That's the treasure hunt is the fun part of it.
No, I think your work and the final product, which we'll share with viewers shortly, puts AI to shame the way you're able to make these connections. Is it more common that art inspires the sports match, or does the sports moment lead you to the art?
Yeah, I think for me, the art is always inspiring what I'm seeing in sports. So as I watch a game or as I look for imagery, I'm always looking for the thing that's, that I can, a thread that I can pull on that is quote unquote artistic. But from like an image standpoint, I think part of what people appreciate about the account and what drives it is sports photography in and of itself is an art form. And I think that drives a lot of, what ends up being compelling because, I'll use screen grabs sometimes and, some of this sort of lowbrow viral stuff is always fun to riff off of, but the stuff that's truly rewarding and interesting to me is the sports photography. So even the sports side is kind of art in and of itself, and it ends up just to
Mhm.
answer your question, sort of blending art is sports and sports is art in terms of like the subjects that I'm tackling.
For those who haven't had the opportunity to enjoy your Instagram account yet, um, could you please screen share and share some images and the thinking behind some from that page?
Yeah, so I think here's a good example of what I was talking about with, the lamentation. Um, there are a few different versions of it, right? It's a theme that's maybe the top five theme tackled in art history, and it's like okay, I've seen lots and lots of depictions of the Lamentation. This one I actually kind of knew ahead of time because I know that Mantegna's Lamentation has the figure of Christ facing you, laying down, head tilted. So when I saw that Luca shot, which sort of went viral and people tagged me in, it's like I immediately know what that is. Whereas something like this one, there are probably a few different directions that you can go, and this is what I was talking about earlier, of like Alma Thomas's style. Right, I was hoping maybe that the areas in here were like brown or black to represent like the hair and faces, but it's still like the shape ended up playing well, and you get kind of these individual figures. Hockey as a sport does very well with abstract imagery. So you can see here like a Joan Mitchell and pile up in front of
Oh, just
the net.
fabulous.
Here's an Alice Baber. So like seeing something like if you know Alice Baber's work, um, kind of like Alma Thomas, a little bit more circular, a little bit more of the colors blending, and some of her most famous works are like kind of X's. Um, I've seen a lot of her stuff go into the auction houses. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I saw this image where it's like, all right, you don't really see hockey players lined up in that formation with that kind of color pattern. So immediately it was like, all right, this reminds me of Alice Baber. I went through my phone, I went online looking up Alice Baber paintings because I wasn't quite sure which one would work well. This maybe I could have gotten something better, but I think it's a fun one. Uh,
Works.
yeah, I mean here's another fun one. Like I think a decent amount of people have probably seen this sculpture before. It's fairly famous. So when I saw the winning routine, um, what's it, Alyssa Liu, I think her name
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Um, when I saw her routine, there were a few different images that ended up going viral, and I saw this one. I was like, all right, it's like literally, it's the title of it, unique forms of continuity and space. That is like it kind of just matches perfectly in the gold and of
Oh, it's
metal moment.
wonderful. And
Uh,
that's the other thing with your account. What you've done for me is led me to then find out more about these artists that I wasn't familiar with or different schools of painting. So it's really been a springboard, not only enjoying the postings, but learning so much more afterwards, just because you've piqued my curiosity about these individuals that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I keep the account going. Feedback like that. I get teachers that reach out and say, I use your account to introduce art to my students. And like that's super gratifying. And it's just another solid reason to kind of keep posting. I think another thing people, reference because I use a lot like famous sculpture, I believe at the Met or the MoMA in New York. Anyways, then look it up after. But famous sculpture. I'll also use some more, obscure artworks, and because I've just photographed art all over the world, and so people say, "Oh, you've introduced me to this new artist and this, this new painting," and that's always fun to hear from people and you know keep things
Yeah.
going.
And the way you stay so current, I know incredibly busy schedule outside of this quote unquote hobby, really appreciated the last couple, most recently of the Yukon Duke momentous game these past few days.
Scroll back up to that one. Yeah, there was a lot to come out of that. The I think you get like these high like a I mean that ending is all time, so there's a lot of just angles and content that comes out of it. So you can see here like the court of death and then Duke fans that smell of death.
Oh,
Really playing
unbelievable.
into the fact that Duke lost. This one I put a little caveat of that, they're not quite the same vibe. I think a lot of people ended up liking this one, but just
Yeah,
that sort of singular figure floating and over the hills, and I don't know, kind of felt right that and at least on the surface reminded me of this Georgia O'Keeffe. But
terrific.
those are where the best things come. Like, okay, there's this
For
magical moment.
those who haven't seen the book yet, could you bring up an image of the book and we can see what you've chosen for the cover there?
That's the cover. It's from a Paris Musketeers, so a French American football team. Um, and I don't know, this one's just so fun of
Oh,
the player flying. What is it? Lucas Giordani. The artist name escaping me, but um,
oh, it's
and yeah,
just
here I can show a little video. This is my dog, but you'll see then
it's
flipping
just
flipping through.
yeah.
And Sue Bird, Asia Wilson, Dirk, so TJ Watt, and then my dog.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
He seems engaged. What does the book allow you to do that social media doesn't?
Yeah, so I often bake layers into the comparisons that go beyond the visual. So I spend a lot of time in the book breaking that down and sort of explaining the thought process behind the matchups. Um, I think on the surface, if you're a kid, you're probably flipping through and just looking at the imagery, which is also fun. It also gives me a chance to go in and do old sports photos. Nowadays, I only really tackle um, new stuff that's happening in the moment. But the book has, Brandy Chastain in there from her famous, World Cup goal, and uh, Jackie Robinson imagery, like things that, if I posted, people would enjoy, but they would say, why are you posting this? Uh, so yeah, the book has a lot of that, and it was just fun. I don't know. I used to be a writer. It's good to sort of get those muscles out of hibernation and get some short form down.
How did you approach selecting the matchups that made it into the book?
Yeah, I tried to focus on kind of top players or top moments, the quote unquote goats across different sports. So you'll see a lot of that in there. Frankly, it was also just a matter of stuff like I mixed in some things that I've done in the past that I really enjoyed. It was sort of just a whirlwind process. I've never written a book before. I didn't really know what I was doing. So just throwing stuff at the wall and kind of seeing what's stuck. Another big thing is uh, when I when I post in the moment, obviously I'm, focused on what people are tagging me, and you get a pretty disproportionate amount of, men's sports, and book gives me a chance to kind of level the playing field in that capacity and focus a little bit more on like representation, which ended up being a little bit harder because I only use public domain art. So
Mm.
there's even, fewer artists of color and to pull from, but tried to, make the book feel symmetrical and, flow across different sports, and it was just a really fun process. So maybe write a sequel. Say.
Definitely. We're all for that. Did writing the book change in any way how you think about your own work?
Uh, it took a lot of time, and I've been a little bit more deliberate in terms of what I post to just my main account now. I think it helps set like a higher. I've always kept a high editorial bar for what makes it onto the account, but I think it's kind of elevated that to the point where, maybe I'll mess around with like that Duke UConn game just had so many things to riff off of, but for the most part really just focusing on like the big moments and the big stuff now, and I don't quite have as much time, but I'm always deliberate about the pairings that I make. The book gave me just some more runway to think through what might work best for certain things.
You mentioned auction houses as a hidden gem.
Yeah.
Why should people maybe explore those spaces a little more?
Yeah, I think they certainly have like a stigma around them of, being pretentious and only for the wealthy, which is like the furthest thing from the truth. Like obviously they're auctioning off millions of dollars worth of art, and you're not going to go there and you're not going to go buy a Van Gogh or win an auction unless you're part of the 99.999 highest percentile. But they are free to go to. They are open to the public. There's hardly any tourists that are ever there. And you get to see art that, sure, maybe you're not buying, but you're obviously not buying art from a museum. So they really are museums that just turn over every 2 weeks, and you see art that maybe no one's ever seen before in public and maybe won't ever see again. They do a really good job of kind of curating and showing you a wide range of different art, because that's how you end up building your lots and your auction. And I don't know, they're great. The new Sotheby's in the Breuer building is giving them a really fun space to play around with. I love going there. Um, Even like, I don't know, like the Met is incredible. But the only time I go to the Met is anytime they have a new exhibition. I've seen the permanent collection a million times over, and the Guggenheim, very exhibition driven, but you go there once and then it doesn't turn over for another 6 months. Whereas the auction houses are
Hmm.
always changing and they're always high quality art. Like, sure, it's fun to go to galleries, and you get the top galleries have your top artists, and sometimes I like looking at stuff that is newer and up and coming artists, but the auction houses just always, they always hit. So,
And no, it's great to hear. What
yeah.
do you hope readers take away after spending time with the book?
Uh, that's a good question. Um, I think you might have alluded to this at the end in the intro, but I do think what makes the book and the account fun is, you're taking two things that people always think of as kind of these diametrically opposed disciplines, and it shows that there really are kind of the same. There are not that many differences. Artists practice, athletes practice, brushstrokes or movement. There's focus. There's emotions, and that lens can be applied to a lot of different things in life. I think we're probably at a pretty politically charged time in our history, and I think if people kind of take a step back and realize, probably a lot more similarities than we do differences, and like how do you bring that together as opposed
Hmm.
to working to pull them further apart. So um yeah, it's kind of just a fun way to maybe approach serious like I consider art to be like a serious topic in the sense of like there's a lot to learn and it's a um it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years of things that you can explore and yeah, it's a cool way to approach it.
Just building on that, if someone walks into a museum tomorrow because of your work, what do you hope they maybe see differently?
I mean, just the fact that they're walking into a museum because of my work is pretty cool, and pretty exciting. But art is up for interpretation, right? One person may see one thing, and one person might see another. But the fact that you're there seeing it, I think, is the most important step. And um, if the book can help inspire people to kind of leave their comfort zone and explore art, I hear a lot of people saying I like the art and my spouse likes the sports, and we're constantly sharing this because it's a shared language. And I think it's anytime people are consuming more art or more sports, I guess it's good for everybody. So
Building on that, you've said that visiting museums is like learning about a city. What have you discovered through that type of lens?
yeah, so I think on the like maybe you don't get this from the auction houses, but on the museum front, like anytime I travel to a new city, I'll check out the museums and obviously, the architecture, the works that are curated there oftentimes reflect the history of that city and the pulse and the vibe of what you might experience in the same way that, the restaurant scene and the food and drink of a given city. So, anytime I travel, I love to at least visit one or two museums wherever I'm going, and it does make me feel a little bit more connected to wherever I'm visiting.
In closing, as you continue to grow this idea through the book, collaborations, museum events, what excites you most about where this is going?
Making new posts. It's funny when people say that I'm AI or I use AI. It's like the most exciting part for me and the true reason why I really keep it going is because every time I come up with something that is worthy of posting, it really is like a drug and like a dopamine hit, and it's addicting. And so it's like, okay, you like why even if AI could do it, why would I use it? That takes the part that I'm craving off the table, and there is no point anymore. So the book, collabs, all that stuff aside, like the end of the day, it's the rush that I get from like, oh, this is sick. This is gonna pop. And that can't be duplicated. And that's at the end of the day, what's at the core of what I do. So
Well, it's most engaging. We're all so glad you have this habit and continue to look forward to many, many more, and definitely encourage people to pick up a copy of Art, but Make It Sports, Epic Matchups, where art and sports collide. In addition to following you on the social media outlets, which we'll have in the closing credits. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the time, LJ. It's been fabulous having you here. Enjoy your book so much. Keep looking back to it as well as checking to see when you have time to make some new post. But want to just end by wishing you continued success with future endeavors.
thank you so much. I appreciate the curated questions and the time, and yeah, for highlighting my work.
Fabulous. Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.